to record. Ladies and gentlemen, I have my YouTube channel, I'll admittedly, for selfish reasons. Of course, I love the work that we do on our channel, helping people to get off the prison grid and teaching the principles of interiorism. But one of the main reasons for having my channel is that I get to sometimes meet my heroes and interview my heroes. And today, I have one of the major heroes of my life on today, Mr. David Allen, who is the author of the great book, Getting Things Done, which is a productivity program, but so much more. Mr. Allen, how are you doing today?
Oh, terrific. Javier,
really
thank you very much. Thanks for the
really
invitation.
appreciate having you on. So this book, Mr. Allen, was my first introduction to you, and this is the original book. I bought it probably at the age of 22, and I read the first few paragraphs in it, and you were talking about something about how the tech world had adopted it. And I said, well, I'm not big into tech, so I put it back on the shelf, and I was not reintroduced to you again for about 4 years. Then at the age of 26, I bought this book, Getting Things Done. This is the original book that I bought, 26. That was about 13 years ago. And as you can see, it's well noted and so on, underlined. And your book pretty much saved my life. I had been reading self-help literature from about the age of 16, but nothing stuck. I couldn't really implement any of the tools. I ended up being stuck in a job that I hated. Your book was the first book that really gave me an actionable solution to my life to start turning things around. So I just want to say thank you very much for that, and I highly appreciate it. Around the same...
You're welcome. And by the way, all I did, Javier, was just define the game. You're the guy who decided to play it. So I'm not a motivational speaker. I'm not trying to motivate people to do this. I just wanted to define the game, put it out there, and then whoever wanted to use this, however they wanted to use it, great.
Allow people to adapt it. And about the same time I discovered you, I discovered Eckhart Tolle and Abraham Hicks. And as you said, you basically defined the game, and then I was able to apply it specifically to these modalities in a beautiful recipe, and it worked out very beautifully. And you know, one of the first things I wanted to discuss was you've said in many interviews that you're the laziest person you know. And I'm like that too. I'm the laziest person I know. So how does being lazy actually give you sort of an advantage in this game?
Well, come on. One of the reasons, Javier, that GTD became such a popular meme in the tech world is designed around making you lazy. How can you much easier do X, Y, or Z? And that's what tech is focused on. That's what their products are focused on. So it's funny. People in the tech world are probably the hardest working people about how to not work hard that you ever met. Right? They spend 24 hours a day trying to figure out, how do we make this easier? How do we simplify this? How do we digitalize this? How do we automate this, etc.? So I've always been a fan of that kind of stuff. It's like, I hate wasting time. God, if I'm trying to walk out of a room, I just look, what's the easiest way to walk out of the room? Now, I may decide not to do that easy route. I might decide I want to, coast and walk around and whatever. But at least I know if I wanted to get out of here as quick as possible, that's the way to do it. So I keep thinking, I guess, I don't know if that's something I was born with. I think it was something just in my DNA or whatever that just says, how much easier can we do this? Is there a more simple way to make something happen that we want to have happen? So that's been a lot of my driver. You could call that lazy. You could call it efficient. You could call it, I don't know, whatever you want to call it. It's like, why have a thought twice?
Exactly. And many people I've interviewed in lofty positions also, they say they're lazy, but the people around them say, no, this person's very hardworking. So even though it doesn't feel like work, others would define it as work. But I wanted to go into a little bit of your childhood because I want to sort of get the background of how you came up with this system and what life experiences led you to that. So it says you grew up in Shreveport, Louisiana, actually, and you won a state championship in debate and so on and so forth. Now, were you raised like I was in a good Catholic family or Christian family?
No, I was raised in a family. My mother was a pretty much a radical as a Southern woman. My
Oh, wow.
dad died when I was 9 years old, so she pretty much raised her by herself. But she was, she'd gone to college earlier than most people her age, and so she gave me a lot of context about following whatever the path was that it looked like I was following. So she gave me acting lessons when I was 11, because she saw me. I would come in and have memorized, something from whatever and do it for the audience in my living room. And so she knew that I had some sort of a bent that way. So she was a great mom that she was able to support me in doing that kind of stuff. So yeah, so I had the great experience of being able to experience lots of things young, before a lot of other people sort of my age might experience them.
So you had sort of a free path to explore anything you wanted, and that was a great launching pad. At what point did you sort of get into spirituality? Because I know your background, like mine, comes from a sort of spiritual bent, and then you got into the business world and so on. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, I had experiences internally, spiritually with a small s, if you will, that let me know there was a much bigger world than the world I was experiencing out here materially. And so that other world became something to explore, something to find out how to access. Because if it was what it was supposed to be, or what it could be, or what it was, it knew this world better than I did. And so learning to trust, you could call it now intuition, if you will, the still small voice inside of you, Javier, that knows what you ought to be doing once you stop the podcast, right?
Exactly.
Right. And that was a new thing for me in my late 20s to discover that there was that part of me that had access to that, and that there was a way to access that in more conscious, objective ways.
Oh, so as a child, you this was in your 20s. As a child, did you access any of that, or did you study any of that, or did that
I
come later?
had some of those experiences. I was singing in my choir in the Methodist Church in Shreveport, Louisiana, and we would go down on Sunday nights and lead and kneel in the altar and look up at the Christ and
Sure.
whatever. And at some point, I had a big aha. It's like and I couldn't put words on it, but it was like I had the experience of, oh, that's that energy field. And so then I'd come back in for about 3 or 4 days. I'd wash dishes. I'd be helpful to my mom. I would do all kinds of things simply because that energy field, I experienced. After that, it's like, oh, okay, man, it kind of lost its
Sure.
luster. But I knew
Like
there
a
was some.
Satori type thing.
I knew there was something there. I knew there was something to access. I knew there was something that that was bigger than whatever this is, that had an energy field that was powerful.
Now, what I've been able to gather is that at some point, and I don't remember whether this was your teens or your 20s, you met a gentleman who said he owed you a karmic debt, and then he taught you martial arts. Was this in your 20s?
Yeah,
And
late
can you
20s.
tell us a little bit more about how that came about? Did he just come up to you, or did you meet in some other forum?
Oh, we were smoking dope together in Berkeley.
Wow. So
and he sort of had recognized me as someone from his internal spiritual experiences and said he owed a karmic debt to. And so he was willing to just hang out with me and teach him what he had known in a very tough life that he'd lived up to that point. And so,
So
long story
you
short,
went through sort of the hippie aspect, and I also heard from interviews that you actually hitchhiked through Afghanistan. Is that correct? And
I
things
did.
such as this. And it
Yeah.
looks like this thing sort of met it. If we can talk, if you feel comfortable talking about this, it looks like this sort of met its peak. It's your friends actually had you committed to a hospital at some point.
Yeah.
And was this due to the experimentation with drugs and things like this?
To some degree. Yeah. The drugs had basically sort of fried the nervous system responses to to a lot of stuff. So I would hear voices, didn't know where they came from, and but my nervous system, I was open to a lot of information about that, and that got pretty weird, and so I started just following the path of the voices that I heard, but they were not all the right voices to listen to. There are a
Right.
lot of voices in the universe, and so as I was following them, then I fell off the track, and so various situations happen. So they said, this guy is weird. Let's get him off the track. He's off the track. Let's put him somewhere where he won't hurt anybody, or whatever they did. And so, I got transferred to Napa State Mental Hospital. Yeah.
And it was after this that you sort of started getting it back together, and I'm assuming reconnected with the spiritual path that was a little bit more structured.
Correct.
And that, and were you influenced by any spiritual teachers in particular, like Krishnamurti or Alan Watts, anyone of that period? Because I know you quote them in your books.
No. All of those had great stuff. I read Suzuki and Alan Watts while I was in high school, so I was sort of
Wow.
already kind of attuned to the Zen sort of aesthetic and consciousness. I sort of knew that from the beginning, but no, there were lots of people. And the guy I met who basically sort of trained me in karate he'd been studied as a psychic at the University of Pennsylvania.
Wow.
Had a lot of he had a lot of awareness, and he was a very old soul, and was able to recognize me as someone he needed to transfer what he'd known and his experiences. So I learned a lot from him, and with my time with him, then I learned to sort of pay attention to lots of other subtle stuff. Read a lot of books, read Scientology, Hubbard's book, read Black Elk Speaks, one of the best books ever in terms of spiritual awakening, and so a lot of those sort of to accelerate my transition to my awareness that there were lots of other universes out there. And at some point, I sort of uncovered and discovered the occult literature, the Blavatsky and
Sure.
Ledbetter and all of the occult writers, who had done all that, who were doing all that stuff in the late 1800s and early 1900s, discovered them. It was like, wow, there are masters out there who kind of know this game. And I started to recognize, wait a minute, a lot of what I'd been experiencing internally, there were people out there who sort of knew what that was and knew what I needed to do about them, or what I could do about them, or how to understand them. So that was a big transition back in when was that? That's got to be 1991, 92, 93. So that's when I sort of uncovered that whole world, and then said, okay, how do I find who these people are, and discovered a guy named John Roger, who then became my
Sure.
sort of spiritual coach, and was for 50 plus years until he died. And, and he was just ahead of me in the game. He'd sort of uncovered this path as well, and then had a lot of great ticks and trips and energy field that I was able to tap into. So that's where all of mine came from. Still there. It's just I don't talk about it. I don't publicize this. It's my inner world, and I don't expect people to buy into this. I don't expect people to. I'm not a proselytizer.
Sure.
But
if someone's interested.
If somebody's interested, I'll tell them what I know.
Now, concurrently with this, and I feel that you and I have a lot in common in that you've said you've had 36 careers, I believe, by the age of 36.
I say jobs, not careers. Come on.
Certainly not careers.
Yeah. Come on. Some of them were one-nighters,
Oh, wow. And is one of the reasons behind that is that you were giving a lot of emphasis to your seeking and your spiritual studies, that you didn't really want to be tied down to a career?
And I wanted to survive. I had to eat.
For sure. And sometime you said around the age of 36 is when you started going into consulting.
Probably, yeah.
And did you go into consulting first and then generate these principles, or did you have these principles?
No. Well,
as far as the GTD principles.
Yeah, no, they were sort of simultaneous. I came into that after, dropping out of graduate school, wanting my own enlightenment instead of studying people who had theirs. And so did a lot of spiritual exploration, meditation exploration, diet exploration, and then got a black belt in karate and the martial arts. And a lot of that taught me about the value of clear space. I couldn't have told you then, but in retrospect, that was a lot of what it was in terms of your ability to be able to focus and produce power.
And
then because again, I didn't have a career or profession. I just tried to help people doing their own businesses. So I became a good number two guy. So I just helped a lot of my friends with their own businesses, and then I fix their systems and get bored and go find another job. Then I discovered, oh, wait a minute, they call people something to do that and they pay them. It's called consultant. Duh. Okay. So I haven't stopped since then, 1982, just going, okay, let me be available for people who might want what I have uncovered. And it turns out I uncovered and discovered the what you'd call the GTD principles. I didn't call it GTD until we published the book in 2021, as a shorthand for getting things done. But those principles I discovered back in 82, 83. And I started to use, they worked for myself, gave me more control, more sense of focus, more sensibility to know what to do that was meaningful, at any point in time. And I use those with my consulting clients and produce the same results for them.
The thing that really shifts it for me, and you can tell me if I'm correct in this, is that I studied time management during my study in self-help and growth, and it never worked, but it was always tied to time. You release it from time and put the emphasis on self-management, as opposed to, like you say in your book, you can't start with 1 hour and come out with 2.
True. Well, they call it time management because people who are making a lot of money don't want to admit they need to help in managing themselves. So they call it time management to make it, oh, I'm so important, I need to manage my time. Oh, how about manage yourself, dude?
Sure.
And so, I've never had any formal or traditional education in time management, productivity, business or psychology. All my stuff is just street smarts.
From the street smarts, you got it.
What works to keep your head clear, so you can focus on what you want to focus on, the way you want to focus on it. Duh.
Exactly. And I wanted to get into a little bit of the application of that. And, I think it was in your book that you wrote this statement, but I ended up contemplating it for about 2 years. it's you said something to the effect that I always look for the unseen factors that contribute to the visible, and you have more power there, correct?
Sure.
And this is
I
basically
mean, I mean, come on, Javier. How much do you understand electricity?
not none.
I figure, but you can turn on the light switch. You're
Exactly.
using it. You're using it right now, right?
Exactly.
So it's usable, but you don't have to understand it. You just need to understand, kind of how it works and how to use it.
Precisely. And so I saw a podcast that you did probably 13, 14 years ago, and a guy described GTD perfectly. He said, "Okay, David, I have to collate all of my stuff, then we process it, then we put it, we file it, and we defer it for later. We put it on this." And you said, "I'll give you about a C on that." And I was sort of mad at you because I said this guy described it perfectly, but you say that it takes about 2 years for someone to actually get this. I might be a little slow. It took me about 6 years to actually get it. But what I got was that the system is not the main event. This is a system to basically shut up your conscious mind so that then you can focus in the now and actually allow the creativity to come up. Is that correct?
Correct.
So that's what I think a lot of people, even though they practice it, they get too involved in the steps and the word of it as opposed to the spirit. And I think that's where a lot of people fall off. Is that correct?
Correct.
Sure. So what I wanted to basically get to here is, first of all, I just want you to sort of guide us through the basic steps of GTD and what
Yeah.
we call horizontal and vertical planning.
Sure. Well, first of all, if you want to be clear, you got to get what's in the way of clear. And that's very simply what's on your mind that you can't finish in the moment, that still is regurgitating or that still spinning inside your subliminal consciousness. Oh, I need cat food. Oh, I need a new boss, or I need to figure out this new software, or you just need to get that out of your head. Your head's a shitty office. It is. It wasn't
Sure.
designed to do that. Your brain evolved to only remember, remind, prioritize, and manage relationships between more than 4 things. That's don't shoot the messenger. That's cognitive science now. I just figured that out 40 years ago. Your head's for having ideas, but not for holding them. So, duh. That's the first thing you need to do is make sure you get all this shit out of your head. And then decide what exactly you're going to do about it. You don't want to become just a list manager. People have lists all over the place of all this stuff, but they'll write things down like mom. Oh, good. You probably had one. Why'd you write it down? Oh, her birthday's coming. Well, what are you going to do about her birthday? Oh, I don't know. So there's a second step, which is once you've captured stuff that has your attention, decide what exactly you need to do about it, if anything. Is it trash? Is it reference? Is it a to-do later? Is it something you need to move on now? I mean, I know, Javier, this requires a serious muscle. It's called think.
Sure.
And most people haven't actually thought about what's on their to-do list, what they need to do about it, what outcome they're committed to achieve about it, and what the next step is they would need to take to move the needle on it. And those are the things I just uncovered. I didn't make it up. I just uncovered. Here's what anybody needs to do if you want to make progress on something you have some commitment about. It's like, what's the outcome desired? What's the next action required? And most people don't do that. They actually don't do that. I've spent thousands of hours, Javier, desk side with some of the best and brightest people making a lot more money than I'll ever see in my life, walking them through this process of taking stuff that's on their mind and having them make those decisions that actually move the needle on it, make progress on it, and get it off their mind. It's not something we're born doing. You didn't hop out of your mom and go, gee, mom, what exactly we're trying to accomplish? And what's the next step? Is that yours or mine? You didn't do that.
Come natural.
You weren't born knowing how to cook spaghetti or how to dance you had to learn those things. So this is actually a learnable thought process more than anything else.
Sure. And then, so once we process it, of course, one of the greatest aspects of your system is that the only thing that goes on the calendar is appointments and time specific aspects. And that's something that it seems that even today in business, and I want to go into this as well. This is one of the main aspects that I hope we can get clarity on. But even today in business, most people don't understand that.
Yeah.
It would seem that way. So
if they did, I'd be out of a job. So yeah.
So that's a good thing. So to take this up a notch, here's another question that I had for probably about 13 years. In your book, when you were talking about the vertical planning process, which is the product planning, you said something that there's a process for this that we can just apply, and there's a creative process that we can apply. What is the creative process that you've discovered? Just a sort of an aside question. It's wrote in your book.
Well, we're all creative, so there's no mystery about how you produce creativity. You just need to be creative about what solution you want to come up with. So if you're talking about the natural planning model, so how do you take a project and walk it through? How do you get control of it and manage it appropriately? Then, yeah, there's a what's the purpose of the project? What's the vision of wild success? And then give yourself permission to say, what are all the potentially relevant pieces of information or data or perspectives that I need to add to this before I make any commitment about what to do about it? And that's a whole lot of what the creative project planning or life planning or any kind of other planning that you need to do. And I didn't make that up. I just recognized it. That's what you do. That's how you get out of your room. That's how you got dressed. That's why you put on that tie. You said, okay, what am I trying to do? Here's what success would look like. What are all the things I need to consider? That tie, that shirt, whatever. And then you decided to make a decision about what to do about it. So I just recognize the natural planning model. That's what we do to naturally get anything done. Get dressed, buy a company, whatever. So if that's what you're talking about, yeah, that creativity will show. Anybody can do that. You know, your 3-year-old can do that. Gee, how would you like Christmas to be, or Hanukkah, or whatever? Ooh, yeah, cool. And then give them permission to just have whatever ideas they have.
And it's going to show up once we have everything captured and organized, as opposed to 100 open loops in our head.
Correct. Well, yeah. What will show up is, here's our advancement plan, and then you need to be open to take new information, recorrect, reconfigure, refocus, recalibrate based upon change. Well, we can't buy a Christmas tree, kids. But what do we do now? Oh, I don't know. Can we buy an artificial Christmas tree? Oh, that's an idea. How much creativity could you expect from a 4-year-old?
Yes. And so there's one phenomenon that before we go on to the business aspect, which is, to me, is a very interesting aspect of this, there's a phenomenon that's been talked about of late of GTD burnout. And I sort of understand where the people are coming from, but I also understand where they're going wrong. And I was hoping you might address some of it. There was an article in the New Yorker in 2020 called "The Rise and Fall of Getting Things Done," and basically talked about, like, you remember the website 43 Folders. Well, it seems that the gentleman who ran that website is now not a proponent of GTD. And again, I think it's because people see it as sort of a rigid set of steps and they don't understand the spirit behind it. But there are people, for example, like Cal Newport, who say GTD is excellent for doing certain tasks, but it's not conducive to deep work and creativity. What do you say to that, and how would you, quiet the naysayers on that
I'd
GTD
say,
is not conducive?
what deep work and creativity do you want to do? What has your mind? What has your attention about that?
Sure, and
Right.
anything.
And if whatever they come up with, GTD is just simply by getting your head clear. That's all. Like, what do you need to do to get present? How do you get that off your mind? Well, what do you need to get off your mind? That's your issue, not mine.
Exactly.
Right. So if they have something on their mind, oh, I want to be able to write the great American novel, or I want to be able to do this by day. Great. What is that? What would success look, sound, or feel like? What's the next step you would need to take? So anybody who thinks GTD is overstructured, I say, you don't get it. The only structure is to what do I need to do to feel appropriately engaged with my internal commitment. Period.
And it's open from that.
Well, not open from that. It's like, well, whatever that is, then you decide, okay, what do I need? What I need to do to get that off my mind? Oh, that's just a crazy idea. Great. When would you like to remind yourself of that crazy idea? You want to write it on, print it out on a word processor sheet and stick it in a crazy ideas folder that you may look at from time to time? You want to put a little trigger on it that says, remind me in 6 months about this idea, whether I want to do anything about it. So most people don't get the simplicity and the subtlety of what this is.
And so, just as a technical aspect, you've spoken about, especially in your new book on the one that was published a few years ago, the newer version of Getting Things Done, that people are actually moving back to physical systems and paper and so on, as opposed to computerized. Do you still see that? Some people.
Yeah.
Do you see that that's the best way to do it for the way?
There's no best way. Only best way is what you're actually going to use. So you're using it to capture and you're using it to remind. See, a lot of ADD and ADHD type people, they might like the digital world in their iPhone or whatever, but it's a black hole. And not only that, they're too impatient to punch more than one or two buttons. So in their face, called write it down, stick it in your face as a physical thing, for some of those people, they've discovered is actually a more efficient way and effective way to do it. None of them are perfect, because if you're writing it down physically and materially in that world, then you don't have all the cool connectivity and linking and and copy and paste kind of ability you have if you put your stuff in the digital world. Neither of them is perfect. The digital world is perfect. I use that a lot, not for capture. For capture,
Physical capture tool.
no better. No batteries required, no Wi-Fi required. I can do it anywhere, and whatever. So that's my capture tool. But obviously, what I want to get organized when I go out for errands, I want to be able to punch. I'm using Office 365 right now. I just punch task and look at my errands list. There's kind of a big duh about this, Javier.
Yeah, that's true. It's a very versatile. So it can work across any instruments, and that's a good thing.
You just need what do you need to do to get this out of your head? Period.
Exactly.
Period. Right.
Simple.
And you have to decide that.
Precisely. And by the way, to segueing into our next segment of the conversation, you do have a new book coming out tomorrow, correct? And it is the Getting Things Done with Others team. And would you like to sort of describe a little bit of what's going to be in that book?
Sure. Well, it's all about essentially it's the GTD principles, but applied to a group.
Sure.
I mean, Javier, you're on a team. I don't care if you're just working solo right now, but you have to engage with to make sure this podcast happens, to make sure whatever you do, right?
Of course.
I was just walking, okay, well, what do you guys have on your mind as a team? Let's capture that. Because anything you have on your mind as a group just means it's not on cruise control yet. Right?
Exactly.
So capture has a very appropriate application to groups of people. What's on the team's mind? And so the 5 steps that I basically just discovered and objectified are capture, clarify, organize, reflect, and engage. The capture step is just, okay, what's got the team's attention? How do we apply that? What would that look like or sound like if we did that? And then clarify, okay, now we had the team do a brain dump on a whiteboard or wherever, and say, okay, what are you going to do about that? Is that something to move on right now? Is there some commitment as a team we've got about that? So there's a clarify step. And then, by the way, who's going to do it? And
who's got it?
If you can't finish that right now in 2 minutes, where are you going to park some reminder of that who needs to look at when and how often? So you make sure that the team is appropriately engaged, given all the changes and speed of things that are going on these days. So that's the organized step. And then how often does somebody need to review this? Who owns the team? Who owns the purpose of this team? Why does this team even exist? Right. So these are questions that teams, they sort of answer, or they wouldn't be a team. And they're sort of doing this. Or, they've been defunct a long time ago. But most of them could use a lot more clarity and a lot more specificity about each one of these steps.
They're not doing it systematically.
No.
Exactly. And that leads into my next question that I wanted to ask you. See, I of course you've read Eliyahu Goldratt and The Goal and Theory of Constraints and all of this. And a big part of his system as well, like you said, is a big duh. And he said that whenever someone says it's obvious or it's a duh, that means you've hit on a very important principle. But the problem is not knowing these principles or learning them, it's convincing people. And I've worked in several big companies, big organizations, and I cannot convince anybody, whether I've been in a management position or an employee position, to even consider these principles. They would be like, oh, okay, we'll consider it. Some people have said, don't talk to us about this. It's very hard to convince people or teams to use these principles. In your experience, how do you get people to even have GTD on the radar or convince them to utilize these principles more effectively?
Forget it.
Forget it. It's not going to happen.
Well, depends who owns the team and what standards they think are critical to make sure the team works optimally.
Exactly.
Right.
So you just have
are they willing to have meetings with people have more than one digital appliance in front of them? Are they willing to start meetings late? Are they willing to start meetings without a clear purpose about the end game of what they want to accomplish by when?
The majority of them.
Are they willing to have people show up and not know what role they're supposed to be representing in that meeting? Well, these are mechanics of how you work together with people, and that's a lot of what we've done in the new book, is describe dysfunctional and functional versions of the mechanic of how you work with other people. I'm not about the big game in terms of what's the team trying to do and the big vision about what it wants to accomplish, but what are the things that are not being handled mechanically in terms of how the team works together that then undermine the team's ability to focus on the bigger stuff.
Sure. And do you, just in your experience in business, do you see the big organization giving way to smaller organizations? Trevor Blake, for example, said that the top-down model is dead. within a few years, all of the top-down companies, they won't be able to compete because it's just such a large behemoth, and they're not able to move quickly. Do you see that happening in
Yep.
general?
Yep. In general, I think the latest estimation I saw is that 85% of the American workforce is going to be subcontract.
Wow,
You're going to work for a project, not for a company.
exactly.
So, and don't shoot the messenger. And that's not right or wrong. It just, that's what's happening.
Sure.
That's what's going on. And so the companies need to be able to understand the necessity to manage hugely flexible teams and workforces and people in different roles and so forth in terms of what they're trying to accomplish. And it's just going to push up against a lot of lack of clarity about what are we trying to accomplish, what are we about, what's our purpose, etc. All those good old, eternal business questions.
On my channel, we talk about being free from a job and a boss. This is going to happen anyway without us having to do anything. So you better get good at organization.
Yeah. Well, better get good based on what you want to do.
Exactly.
What are you trying to accomplish? You better know what you're trying to do, and then how do I allocate, resources, to make that happen. It's the old productivity equation. It's zeros and ones. What are we trying to do, and how do we allocate resources or reallocate them to make that happen? That's all getting things done was about. That's all this new book is about. See, the only reason you even consider yourself a team is because there's a purpose to be a team. What's the purpose of you and your taxi driver? What's the purpose of you and your life partner for dinner?
Right. It's that unseen thing that's guiding the scene again.
Sure. But it doesn't need to be seen unless you have a conflict. Whose task is garbage in the family? To get rid of it, to recycle it. Is that yours? Is that your life partner? Is that your kids? Whose is it?
Mine, usually.
Yeah. And if it's not, then they'll pick up the slack because they don't want it to mount up. But basically, my wife's job is dogs in the morning to go out pee and poop. My job is late night dogs pee and poop. And that just kind of is blended into that in terms of our agreements with each other. Who's handling what?
Mostly subconscious agreements until there's a conflict.
Yeah, right. And ultimately, one of the biggest issues about teams is role clarification. Whose job is this to handle this? See, when you uncover something, if you go through the process called what's got the team's attention, okay, that's things coming up. We need to figure out how to do the budget. We got a new boss. We're going to have to figure this thing out. We got a competition that just showed up at, whatever those things are, that may have the team's attention. And we go, great. What needs to happen about this? What would be our ideal outcome? Oh, let's get clarity about that. Let's make sure that's put in place. Let's put it, great. Who's got that role? Is that yours? How is that mine? No. And then you walk out of there and having to have 16 other meetings to try to figure out what the hell happened.
Which is why a lot of corporations are
that's yours, that's mine. You do that. We need to know that by when. If you need to undo that and let's renegotiate, that's fine. But getting clarity about roles is a huge one out there.
And that would save a lot of overhead for sure.
Oh, huge.
Huge. But I'm definitely that's coming out tomorrow. I'm definitely looking forward to reading that book. I think it'll be a game changer for a lot of organizations. I mean, as long as the big ones last, hopefully they'll pay some heed to it.
Yay, hopefully, yeah.
Yes, sir. But
if they're doing good work. If they're not doing good work, then
who cares? That's right. And go ahead.
No, I was going to say, goodbye, see you. You weren't doing as good a work as you could have done. Somebody else has got it better.
That's right. It's creative destruction. Schumpeter talked about. But just one final question I wanted to ask is, you have. I was reading that you in the United States in Ojai, California, you had like a prize-winning office, a beautiful office, and you ended up selling that, and you moved to Amsterdam. Why did you move to Amsterdam?
Why not?
Why not? It is a beautiful place. A friend of mine and I were talking about actually going there in a few months just to visit, and I've heard so many good things about it. But do
Oh,
you
it's
enjoy
terrible.
living
No,
there?
no, it's awful. It's ugly. It's dangerous. You never want to come. Stay away. Stay away. No, it's great. We just want to leave the U.S. The U.S. is so focused.
Mhm.
Most people in the U.S. don't even have passports. They say, "Oh, is there another world out there?" Oh, duh. And
We
Catherine,
think
my
it is
wife,
the
and
whole
I
world.
have always been more thought of ourselves as more global people and not necessarily identified. We don't have kids, and our work became much more virtual and much more global. So we said, come on. We saw people slightly older than us look a lot more sedentary than we wanted to be. So we said, time to throw the dart and have another adventure. What the heck? So we did. But it could have been anywhere as long as I was near a good airport, given the work that I was doing. Could have been Stockholm, could have been Copenhagen, could have been London, could have been Kyoto, could have been, South Africa. But it turned out, Amsterdam happened to be a great sort of perfect storm of all the great qualities that we actually wanted to get to. It's a foreign country, but everybody speaks English in Amsterdam. So, that wasn't hard. The culture is fabulous. We love the Dutch. We love the Dutch culture. And I didn't leave. I was an American intellectual history major, Javier, in my academic career.
Sure.
And the whole the DNA of the American thought process, I didn't leave it. I came to the source. This is where the Enlightenment started, where the individual took
That is the
precedence over
source.
monarchy and church. And then this got exported to New Amsterdam, called Manhattan now, and the whole U.S. culture through John Locke and through a lot of the other thinkers, that the early American thinkers and politicians and heavyweights were influenced by the culture that started right here, a few blocks from where I could throw a rock now where I live. So I didn't leave anywhere. I just came back to the source. So that was fun. And we love the Dutch people. We love the Dutch culture. And, come on, anywhere on the planet right now. I mean, Netherlands has its issues like everybody else. All more populist, very right wing kind of stuff is emerging here as well.
Yes, it
But
is.
boy,
I've been reading that.
I wouldn't find anywhere else on the planet that I would want to live, given the globality of this, the openness of this, the whatever. But again, it's a terrible place. Nobody ever wants to come. Stay away.
Well,
Stay
I might
away.
be there visiting. Incidentally, just so off the wall question, do you know Wim Hof? I know
No,
do you know of him?
no.
Okay, he has a lot of the breathing methodology, and he's very famous. He's also in around Amsterdam. I believe his main office is in Amsterdam. But interesting spiritual teacher.
Yeah, a lot of cool people here. A lot of cool things. They have a saying here: "If it ain't Dutch, it ain't much." So
That's right. Not to mention the great cheese.
yeah,
Well, Mr. David Allen, I thank you so much for giving us this interview. It's been wonderful and enlightening to speak to you. His new book, Team: Getting Things Done with Others, sold tomorrow. So be sure to get your copy of that, Mr. Allen. I hope to talk to you again soon.
thanks, Javier. Yeah,
Have a wonderful day.
God bless.
You know this.